Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Efrain, good to be back.
Oh, man. Guess who we have in the studio?
I know who we have. Do you know who we have?
We have the legend in our studio, Chris.
Well, the question is, did you wear a diaper? Because I know you're very excited. And I don't want you, in the middle of the show, you might have to go take a bathroom break. And I hope you're ready.
Too late. We are joined today by the legend, the owner of Myth Adventures, Helgi. How are you doing, Helgi?
Real good, thank you. Great.
And Helgi, what type of Hispanic name is Helgi?
It's not Icelandic.
Are you originally from Rio Grande Valley?
Yes, I was born and raised in Reykjavik, Iceland.
And so how did you end up here?
My dad and my mom were separated, and he came over and said, you're coming to America to live with him. So in '59, we moved from Iceland to Philadelphia.
How old were you when you came over?
I was 10, and I had a brother. He was 8.
And you're kind of known in these parts for owning like one of the first, I don't know if the proper term is comic book store or adventure store?
Well, it was originally I was actually a baseball card store, sports card store. Back in Edinburgh in 1989, my wife got kind of upset that I had so many baseball cards in the house. As one day she told me to get him out of the house or get him out of
He's
her
a
way.
hoarder. I'm Kali, but he's a hoarder. So he was hoarding, basically is how the story went. And she was like, I'm tired of all this shit. So get it out, right?
Yeah, in a way. So I surprised her. She came home and I says, I got all the stuff out of the house. It's in my new store. You what?
Wait, so you just went without talking to her first. I bought a store.
Yep.
Here we go.
Yep.
And what year was this?
89.
Okay.
And in the fall of '89, and then I went into I started selling just sports cards, and then I had 2 young guys that came into my store, and they were just sat around and they were telling me, why don't you try comic books? And it was Paul and Andy, their names were. They're both from Edinburgh here, and so I picked their brains for about 6 months, and then I started selling comic books also. And then I had to make a decision because there were other stores opening up, and there was a lot of hype in the cards. And I had to make a decision. In order to service my customers 100%, I just couldn't do both products. So I decided to go with the comics because there were 2 or 3 other sports car stores in McAllen. And me being in Edinburgh, I found out really it was hard to get anybody to come to Edinburgh to buy anything. They would stop only on their way to the courthouse, probably.
And where was your original location?
I believe it was on 13th Street by the courthouse where Friendly Frank's cleaners were.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So that was where your original store was?
It was the original store there, and then about 6 months later, I met a guy from North Dakota. I used to live in North Dakota also, and my wife, through teaching, this teacher, him and I, we went into business together in McAllen, and we opened up McAllen Comics on 25th and Pecan.
Mm-hmm.
And after about 6 or 8 months of having 2 stores, I had owned my own in Edinburgh, and we were partners in McAllen. Sharon Weiss, the prior owner of Myth Adventures, approached me and asked me if I wanted to buy her out. She said, I was taking most of her business away because I had 2 stores on either side of her, and she asked me if I wanted to buy her store, and I said sure, and I bought it for very little, and I didn't tell my wife neither. I came home and that evening I told her I just bought another store. I told her.
And what year was this?
This is September of 70.
70?
I started September of 90.
90. So this is happened pretty quickly then.
Yeah. It was 3 stores within a year.
Okay, and I want to kind of go back. I know in speaking with your granddaughter here, because she's your granddaughter and she works there at the store with you. She mentioned that when you were in the United States, that eventually you were sent to Vietnam.
Yeah, I I graduated in '68, and I got in a little bit of trouble, and they offered me an option, and I took the military. And
Can we ask what kind of trouble?
No.
Those records were expunged for the attorneys out there.
I was a young teenager at the time, and I volunteered for Vietnam, and I spent my 21st birthday there, and I came back. I still had 2 years left because I was on a 3-year obligation, and I stayed in, and I got out, and then 90 days later, after working for John Deere, which wasn't a very promising future at the time, I went back in the military, and I had another stint for 2 years out of the military. Then I went back in for the third time, and I actually retired with a disability back in '84. I was an E7 Sergeant First Class.
And so when you came back, were you already in the Valley, or were you still in
No, I retired in North Dakota, and my wife and I, she became a school teacher, and she was trying to find jobs in North Dakota, and there just weren't any openings in North Dakota at the time.
When were you in the post office?
Yeah, I was there. I just started working for the post office in '84, I believe, and my wife went to a job fair in Hays, Kansas, and she got offered in Weslaco as a school teacher. So I had worked for 90 days. I just passed my 90-day probation in the post office in Minot, and I resigned and came down here with her. I was in at post office in San Juan.
Okay.
And I was the only non-Spanish speaker in that post office.
Oh, wow.
So I got my share of innuendos and stuff. And kept telling me for 7 years that I need to learn Spanish. And I says, no, you're on this side of the river. You need to learn English. But I tried Spanish. Being born in Iceland, I had also served in the service in Germany for 4 years. So I learned German. Mm-hmm. And being from Iceland, speaking Icelandic, and then learning English, and then learning German, I tried Spanish, and I would say one word of Spanish. The next thing I was doing, I was speaking either Icelandic or German.
Once we traveled to Germany, and he started speaking to them in Spanish.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
because I know you do have still a little bit of an accent, even after all these years of being in the States.
Yes, to me, I don't have an accent, but when I listen to myself, then yes, I do.
Yeah, it's just like one of those things where I go to New York or whatever, and I have that y'all, I have that southern twang, which I don't think I have it, but up there I do.
Yeah, but in Iceland, when I left in Iceland, and I was 10, and I did not speak. I knew 3 words. I knew yes, no, and cheese.
Cheese. Why cheese?
I have no idea.
Well, so Helgi, does anyone ever tell you that you look a lot like Stan Lee?
Oh, hundreds of times. Yeah, actually, when I did a convention last year, actually in Houston, and had a kid come in there, and he says, well, you look like Stan Lee, and I says, yeah, he's my father. He said, oh, he really is? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, but he to me, he looked bigger than life, and then when I took a picture with him, and then when I saw the picture, it made me look like I was bigger than him. But actually, he was a good sized person.
And Helgi, what do you think about now? Because back in the 90s, that's when comic books just like blew up. I mean, there was speculation. People were hoarding comics. That's when I, as a kid, first stepped into your shop.
Right. Yeah. Back then, comics were they were normal for, I would say. I had a regular customer base, and then all of a sudden, there was an explosion of it with Superman dying, and there was all other stories. Marvel was doing all these flashy covers. They were making prismatic covers, glow in the dark, and all kinds of fancy covers, and people were basically buying the books for value. It wasn't for their reading. It was at one time they had in the paper or in the news that the comic book industry, the rising prices were outdoing the stock market, and people were buying. I know from case of the Spawn, people were buying cases of Spawn at $1 each, and the guy was offering $5 per issue 2 years down the road. So that's a 500% increase in 500% profit. So there were people just buying books just for the money,
Just to buy them.
just to buy them. And I had a store also. I had also opened up another store in Corpus at this time, and they were just when the market crashed all of a sudden, the comic book market crashed. The readership in Corpus went from, I was selling like 100 Valiant titles, copies of a Harbinger or XO, and they would drop down to like 10 because those were the only people that were actually reading the book, and the other ones were buying for the money, and the whole market just collapsed. Then it's like a run up, and then everybody cashed in.
Hopefully, it's not like Bitcoin nowadays.
No, I have not gotten into Bitcoin. Well, I'm very conservative right now.
What has been the, I guess, your crown jewel, your holy grail of comic books that you've had in your shop or that you've personally owned?
Well, I never really owned any comics per se. I figure
The business owns them, technically.
technically, what my theory was that whatever I don't sell in the store, that's my collection, and I was here for the customer. I was never there for myself. I started like in the 90s, and I was buying number ones, and I was like everybody else, and I says, this is crazy. So I decided at that time never to get involved with the products that I deal in. So that's what I've done now. I have nothing in my house that is in my store.
So Helgi is basically the Tony Montana of comics.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I
Not
think
getting
that's
high on his own supply.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen too many. There was a store in Harlingen, and the guy would open up all his cards. He would open up all his boxes, and he would have nothing left to sell to the customers. And then he had these cards are worth $25,000, and he finally got somebody in Houston to buy him for like $2,000 or $3,000.
Wow.
And he closed up. He had his store went under.
And Helgi, has anyone ever told you how important you were to like the kids in that like area? Because I mean, this was before the internet. It was before you can like order comics. You were the shop. Whatever you had on your shelves, that was it.
Yeah. And I mean, I've had probably more of that now even. There were parents are coming in and saying, well, I was one of your customers 20 years ago, and now I'm bringing my kids in here. And you've been done such a good service of all the products that you had in the store, and you're always here. You have such an extensive collection of back issues and stuff. So I just try to do a little bit of everything and make my always theory was to make the customer happy, leave the store happy,
And have you seen a change like in your like customer base? Because when I went to your store, like as a child, it was usually mostly guys with acne, maybe mostly overweight.
Named Ef'n, or is that a personal story?
Yeah, and like comics just weren't labeled cool. It was kind of like a nerd thing.
Yeah, it was a nerd thing basically. Then there was like an underground things that changed so dramatically because one thing because of the Marvel movies, and then because also of the internet, technology, and the mangas brought in the anime from Japan. That now our readership is more, probably 50% or maybe even more of women customers. Originally, when I started my store, I had one female customer that was a regular, and you would never see a girl come in by herself. No. And I actually got in trouble with a customer a few years ago in my store. I had a 2 or 3 year old girl in there, and she wanted a comic book related item, and the mom and dad told her no, and she started to scream, and then they started dragging her out of the store, and I said, oh, what a beautiful sound, a girl screaming her head up, being dragged out of a comic book store,
yeah,
which only were guys, And the parents looked at me, and they kind of gave me the evil eye, I said, they didn't get it,
Yeah.
But it was just, like I said, it used to be a male-oriented product, where now it's more women, probably, than men.
And do you think it's the, like you said, the manga, is it the movies, or is it the combination of everything, or what do you sell more towards women there at the store?
Well, mangas have more female heroines, and as you know, Marvel actually a few years ago changed all of their characters into females.
Yeah, like the female Thor is gonna come out in the movie.
Yeah, they did all of that, and they're still doing it today. It's Marvel's another one like that. So they're still doing that because they know they're the audience for it. The female readership is out there.
Well, that and only, I mean, if you think about it, if you're tailoring your product to 50% men, 50% of the population, you're losing a lot of possible income.
And that's true.
And I'm sure you're appreciative as long as boy, girl, other, as long as the money's green, you know, we'll take it. Or plastic now, I guess.
Yeah, it's more plastic than money.
But I think what's so cool is that your products are more than just products, because like by themselves, they really don't do anything. But when they get into the person's psyche and their imagination, it just takes off,
right?
Which is so cool. And you probably created so many. If it wasn't for your shop, I probably wouldn't be into comic books or Star Wars or nothing like that. And I'm ashamed to admit that my girlfriend and now wife, I've been with her for like 20 years. It took me at least 10 years to tell her that I would make Star Wars costumes like in my spare time. It was like a dark secret.
Yeah, and like comics to me, like going back to 1959 when my first day, believe it or not, in the school in the United States, I didn't, like I said, I only knew 3 words, and I brought 2 comic books with me to the first day of school, and the teacher took them away from me. Said, you don't read this in here. And I just got up and walked out of that school and went home. I was 10 years old. I'm talking, I had to ride a bus 5 miles to get to school. They gave you tokens for school. And my dad gave me a pretty good whipping for just walking out. But I said, I didn't understand Dick, Sally, and Spot, but I understood these 2 comic books. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't read, but I could use the pictures to figure out what's going on. And later on, as in my store, my wife being a school teacher, she used comic books in the LED program where she got kids interested in reading by using comic books first and then gradually weaning them off the books and get them into regular books. So a lot of people have been helped by comics to learn how to read. Yeah,
I think that's a rite of passage. I know when I was a kid too, early on you start reading comics. You know, you start reading Superman or whatnot, and eventually you move on to novels and eventually, you know,
right,
go to law school type of thing.
The first instance of when a kid gets to pick something they actually like to read.
Yeah, and there's such a big genre of products out there right now, you know, that you have a little bit about everything now. It's that comic book. Also, like I said, like in the 90s, there was just comics. And then you got the comic cards. And then now we have statues, toys. There's probably more, I think right now we're probably selling more comic-related material that's not comic books itself, but the products that go alongside of them.
Mm-hmm. And do you think a lot of it is because people have switched to digital comics, or?
No, digital comics did very little for it. Matter of fact, they were charging $1 more per comic to get the digital readout also. And some books only went into digital. And I said, well, gee, this is the beginning of the end for printed comic books, you know. And then about 6 or 8 months later, people were saying, why am I paying $4 to read something digital that I can get it for $1 cheaper and have the actual thing in my hand? Mm-hmm. So actually, the digital actually increased our readership, I believe, in the sales of comic books.
Really, that's very interesting. Because like you said, it's almost the exact opposite of everything that's been happening.
Right, it is. And I don't know how long this will continue. I mean, hopefully as long as I'm in the business.
Yes. But like you said, at the same time, I mean, as long as people are reading, whether they're digital or not, you still have other things you can sell.
Right.
Statues, sideshow collectible type stuff.
Yeah, a lot of toys. We gotten into the high-end toys. That we're talking $1,000, $2,000 prices for statues.
Yeah, because your nerds grew up. The nerds now have money.
And so the name is Ef'n, and he's a lawyer. And he has plenty of money to spend. Yeah, but it's true, because I know the other when you were at not your current location, just so we can put on the radio or on the not radio. What am I? 1950s.
Yeah.
on the podcast. Where's your current location at?
We're at 720 West Nolana, right west of the Burger King, between Burger King and the Vantage Bank.
Okay, and you had another store. I think it was on 10th, right?
I was on 10th Street, 5208, 5206, up there by Senior Plaza. And before that, I was by Applebee's. And then before that, I was at behind the SAS shoe store.
Yeah, I think it was not the recent location, the one that you're currently at, but the one before that. I walked in and had some money in my pocket, and I saw the Wolverine's first appearance, and I was like, "Oh man, it's like mortgage, comic book." And I don't have a wife like Efrain, but at the same time, I was like, "No, I can't do it." So it's true. I mean, like Efrain said, we've grown up, and we have a little more disposable income, and I think the passion that it's not just a magazine, or it's not just a statue, it's not just staples and pieces of paper, it's something meaningful.
Yeah.
And your business, it's a family business, right?
Yeah, it's I started in 90, and actually my daughter Hope, she helped me work in the store. She would come in there, and while I was still at the post office, she would work in the store for me. And then I have my grandson and my granddaughters are working now. And my wife is also involved as far as in the business. It's in her name now because for Social Security purposes, I was trying to get her to get Social Security after 4, and she was lacking some quarters, so I sold the business to her. It didn't work out because she's a retired school teacher, and only poor school teachers' retirements are offset Social Security. Mm-hmm. So her first paycheck, she got $1 a month.
Oh, wow.
For her first year, she got $1 a month.
Did you ever see the comic books being made into movies in the future?
Well, not at first. I think, the Batman came out, I believe, one of the few early ones. And I think Stan Lee held up Marvel for about 10 years. He wanted, because he was such a has such a strong influence on the books, and he created some of the characters and all of him and Ditko and stuff. And then he wanted a share of the pie. And I think he negotiated with Marvel for 5 to 10 years before they finally relented and let him have a percentage off the movies. So that held up a lot of the Marvel movies.
Well, and also, I mean, when you started in 1989, that's when the first Batman came out.
Yeah.
Right. And before then, and even after that, there were, a Spider-Man movie, I think the Captain America, Thor, but they weren't the quality of that Batman movie.
No, and that's when I actually got a $125 Batman statue. It was the first statue that I got in the store, and I was terrified. I said, nobody's going to buy that. It's too expensive, and I think I marked it down to $100, and I sold it. But I said, gee, that whole statue now is probably worth $2,000-$3,000. Yeah.
And Helgi, on this show, we ask very controversial questions. One of those controversial questions we're going to throw at you now. If you had to, are you more of a DC person or more of a Marvel person?
Actually, I'm more of an independent person.
Oh, the anti. Well, Marvel has become very corporate, Yeah,
well, as a Disney shareholder, I'm okay with that. as long continue to. Spider-Man does come out this month. Buy your tickets, please. Daddy needs some money for retirement.
Yeah, I used to read The Tick.
Oh yeah, I remember The Tick, a cartoon, not the comic.
Yeah, the comic. I did the comic, and then I would read a few of the other independents. I did a lot of the Marvel comics back in the 60s, middle 60s I read, but that was kind of the early part.
And so, I guess initially I kind of got the impression that you didn't really have the passion for comics, but you do have the passion for comics. I mean, even you had a story when you were a kid having comics. Yeah. So they've always been in your life.
Yeah, they've always been in my life, and I just never realized that, there was that big of a part of me. I just, now I think I've tried to run it more as a business than I do as a collector or a reader. Because there's such a variety of merchandise there, I try to keep my hands on all the stuff, and it's hard to get into any one item. Like I do sell a lot of Gundams, which are plastic model kits. Mm-hmm. Those are the hottest selling things right now, and I can't get any because of the shipping situation.
Supply chain.
So, but the comics are coming weekly. There's just a small hiccup in them, and but there's hiccups in the products that we need to sell along with them, like the boards and the bags and the boxes, and all those products have doubled in price because of the pandemic.
Well, I guess that's good. A good segue is, I mean, the past 2 years, how has COVID affected your business with the quarantine and everything like that?
Well, we were shut down for about 6 to 8 weeks, I believe, when it first came back a year and a half ago, and then we did a lot of online. I got the eBay account going and sold a lot on eBay. And then as things gradually got better, and believe it or not, this year has been my best year in 32 years in the business.
Oh wow!
Its sales have been that great, partly because of the stimulus, and a lot of people weren't working. And a lot of people were just staying at home, so they wanted to do something, and they just wanted to stay home and play with model kits, read comic books, play with toys. So a lot of them had the time and the money because they weren't spending, and they weren't going to the movies, they weren't going to the restaurants, they weren't going to the clubs. So they were kind of limited in what they could spend their money on. So we, as our industry, we profited very well from the pandemic.
Interesting.
You know, it's kind of odd, but things now this year has been the best ever.
What's your thoughts of inflation? Have you had to increase your prices?
Well, we've already most of our products have already been increased by 10% automatically. Most of the stuff, books have stayed the same. They have not increased. Most of them are $3.99 or $4.99. I haven't seen. DC has played a little game that they have 2 covers for every book, and the second cover is always $1 or $2 more. But what I've noticed is, back in the heydays, those were the ones the collectors wanted. Unfortunately, today, they shy away from them. They'd rather buy the $1 cheaper book.
And this is a question I never thought about it before, but are comics made in America, or are they shipped in, or how does that work?
Well, I believe most of them right now are made in Canada.
Oh, okay, so they're Canadian products. Interesting.
And we tried to get you on the show sooner, but your granddaughter said you guys had comic book.
New comic book day.
New comic book
He
day.
gets very crabby on new comic book day because we have a lot to do.
Well, what is new comic book day?
No, it's just comics ship every week. Every week we get 20 to 50 titles every week, different ones. So that rotates 52 times a year.
From different distributors too.
Yeah, and like now I'm dealing with 3 distributors instead of 1. Marvel signed a exclusive contract with Penguin Books, and DC left Diamond about 2 years ago and went with Lunar and another company, and now the other company dropped out, so it's just Lunar. So right now we have to get Marvel from one company, DC from one company, and the rest from.
And that's new from the pandemic, right? Like,
yeah.
We didn't talk about that, how it affects all your.
Yeah, probably because of the pandemic. And plus the exclusivity, you have to sign a contract, and I think a lot of contracts now are people feel they can get a better percentage for their product. I think the companies want to make a little more money because of the pandemic, so they drop these contracts with one distributor only. So,
wow.
And so, new comic book day is when, I guess.
Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
It's technically Wednesday, isn't it?
No, Tuesday. Yeah, DC for Tuesdays and everybody else on Wednesday.
So that's the hot day there at the shop. Well, today's Wednesday, so
He's itching to get back. No. He's like.
No.
And do you have like your usuals like line up?
No, not.
Yes, we do.
Well, I mean, we have the regular people. We have some people come in right away in the mornings, but
some people come in 3 times a day.
Yeah,
really?
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's like borderline like an addiction.
Yes, it is, right, Grandpa?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're buying a comic every time they walk in?
Most of the time, they're buying something. Yeah. Had a guy, one of my new employees that we just hired. He brought a friend in, and he picked up a manga book, and they walked out together. And an hour later, he came in and bought another one.
4 times in one day.
3 or 4 times, he kept buying one.
Yeah, I know. When I walk in there, I try to leave my wallet in the car, so I'm like, I don't spend any money.
Don't do that.
That's defeating our purpose.
No, I mean, it's so like easy to like upsell nerds.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing about, well, I've succeeded so long because you got to remember, my wife and I both worked. I worked for the post office. She was a school teacher. I had a retirement from the military. So for one thing, when I was doing this business, I never looked at it as being a very profitable business. I did it more for fun or for something for me to do to keep busy. So I've always ordered too much, and so I always had a lot of product because I wasn't making my living off the store. Mm-hmm. I didn't need to. Of course, things changed a little bit now. I don't work anymore. My wife's retired, so we pay a little closer attention to the bottom line. But we still order quite a bit. And one thing about when my grandson was in there, he was ordering. You would order 50 of this and 50 of that. Oh, yeah, but we can have it for the next 5 years. That's not the point.
Yeah, we got to get it off the shelves type of thing.
Yeah, there's a cash flow thing in the business. And I learned business by just doing it. And I'm trying right now to teach my granddaughter some of it.
Your granddaughter, you could be doing like, you could be working like anywhere, but you chose to work in your granddad's store, the family business, right?
I didn't. I remember he told me something when I was younger, before I thought I would do anything like this. And he said, I never expected to be working at a comic book shop, and kind of the same for me. So I never expected this. This is not my plan, but honestly, seeing how hard he works every day, because you think owning a comic book shop, it's fun. Oh, it's chill. No, this man busts his ass every day. Like nobody I've seen. So I don't know. That really impacted me for sure.
Well, it's interesting. I think your grandfather has shown, at least from here today, is that his passion is really for the people, for his customers. Mm-hmm. It's not even the comics, whatever, but it's the making the customers happy and the excitement of selling somebody something new.
And that's the way I felt about my business. I was always there. After I started, like I said, buying comics in the 90s, I said, this is not for me. I mean, I'm buying something that somebody else might want, and I'm not going to have it when he walks in. So I just said, I'm here for them, and I've actually had I let an employee go because he thought, employees get first pick of everything that comes in there, and I said, no, they get last pick.
One of the first things that you told me when I first started getting more serious about working there is you have to pick you or the customer right off the bat. You have to either decide to engage or not, and like that's it. That's your choice. Yeah.
Engage. What
like if you engage with the product, then you become invested in it, and then it's more for you, Then,
okay. Yeah.
So you engage to a certain point to sell it, but not for you.
Yeah. I'm still waiting to get my Porsche. my wife won't let me have one. I have a model kit. That's it.
And is there anything you do collect, or one item you're like, look, this is mine. This is never gonna sell. This is like
invoices.
Invoices.
No, I got into stamps. I have a big stamp collection, but I haven't touched it in 5 years. I got into it for a while heavy, but then I just don't have time for it. So I dropped. I have a stamp. I used to collect coins. Those two, and I figure those two are totally opposite of what I do, so that doesn't involve my product.
And do you think when we first started our conversation, you mentioned a little bit of hoarding, right? You said hoarding.
A lot of hoarding.
Is that still like part of the reason you like your business so much is you can hoard a little bit?
Yeah.
As a business?
Yeah, I hoard cardboard boxes.
He hoards everything he can get to hoard.
And my wife gets on me and says, get these things out of my garage. I said, don't you remember? I used these 20 boxes at the convention I did last year, and I made $15,000. I said, those boxes are worth money.
That's gold right there.
Yeah.
There's gold in them there hills.
Yeah. I think, honestly, that's a part of why he's so... You mentioned, do people ask you if you look like Stan Lee, right? Mm-hmm. In our family, he's Albert Einstein.
Yeah.
And he's like this mad genius who kind of curated this weird museum of things, He's an organized mess.
He's the collector from the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah, and I'm very disorganized.
Yeah.
I'm not an organizer. I do 10 things at once, and I don't get any of them done right.
Well, they say that disorganization is a sign of genius.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, and you mentioned something that I kind of want to touch on too is the conventions. And I guess how has conventions, impacted you know, your business in the past, I would say in the past 10 years, I would say, since Marvel started, you know, San Diego Comic-Con, all that stuff it's boomed.
It boomed like crazy, and I used to do like 15 conventions a year, and they were not that big. I mean, some were a few big, and A-Con in Dallas was probably the biggest one. And now I cut back, of course, but we did, because of COVID, there were none for 2 years almost. I did one in Anime Matsuri in Houston this summer, and it was wide open. They had no restrictions, and we did the best we ever, tied our best ever any convention in 20 years.
Oh wow! So it was crazy packed then.
It was crazy, yeah, because people hadn't been out. And then I had another convention in San Antonio, which I did not do because they were limiting the number of people coming in, and plus there was a lot of COVID protocol in there. So about 2 months later, they had a Comic-Con in San Antonio, and I did that one, not expecting to do that well, because I don't do as well. Believe it or not, being a comic book store, I do better at anime conventions than I do comic book conventions.
And what do you think? Why is that?
Because the way I'm set up, just the way I set up a cage, a 10 by 20 cage, the way my setup is, it's not conductive to selling comic books. Because comic books, you got to have them in boxes, you got to have them out there in front, and you got to have the customer go through them. You
also get pretty rare items, though, from animes.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to wonder also if that is the anime is, I mean, again, I don't buy as many comics, is they're more accessible, there's more stores versus the anime items. I figure they're not as prevalent, maybe?
Yeah, there's less anime stores than comic book stores.
So they're harder to get, so thus you can sell more. The demand's higher.
Right.
Interesting. And so are you looking forward to going back to conventions besides the money, or just interacting with people, or not really?
I did 2 this year, and it took a toll. I got a bad back and a bad knee, and I'm physically getting to the point where I just can't do them anymore.
Well, how old are you right now?
72.
Oh, you look great, though.
Thank you.
You look great.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be doing this at least another 40 years.
No.
I mean, especially with...
No, he needs to rest.
Well, I figure another year, but the next year maybe. I'm trying to, full-time maybe, but I like to just piddle around after that, maybe a day here, or an hour here, or 2 hours here.
But Helgi, like you saying something just gave me like a huge light bulb, because my wife just doesn't let me buy like anything like anymore. Oh my gosh, Helgi found a loophole.
It's a shop now.
He created a shop.
I'm not collecting.
I'm businessing.
I'm
businessing. It's a fantastic idea. So if anyone's like listening and your wife's giving you a bunch of crap, open up a comic book shop, but not in the Rio Grande Valley.
I'm about to say, I'm sure Pam is not listening, but if she is listening, I had nothing to do with this, Pam.
And Helgi, what would you want your legacy to like basically be?
Well, I never really think about myself. I've never drawn attention to myself or try to stick out or push my business on other people. I'm very conservative in that part, and I just let the customers decide or my peers. I know I've had some people come into my store and say, I'm going to open up a store just to put you out of business. I said, that makes no sense.
A spite store.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
There's an episode of Kirby Enthusiasm where Larry David makes a spite coffee shop. So he had the money to back it up,
Exactly the same as yours, only charging much lower prices, all for the express purpose of taking you down.
Yeah, but I've never, I don't think about that. No.
Wow. Because in your mind, there's so many kids that grew up walking into like your store that I personally know have taken their kids and said, "This is the store where I."
Yeah, I know. I'm getting a lot of that. Especially now when I moved to the new location, I think our clientele has probably doubled in the number of people who come in there, and like I said, a lot of them are just saying, "I'm bringing my kids in. That's what I used to do, and I'm bringing them in here now." So I've seen a lot of that this year, especially.
Well, you also have a good personality, right?
Well, I don't know. I'm grumpy sometimes, you say. I guess.
No, people like his personality. You talk to people. You talk about their
dogs.
And
I think I learned dealing with the public, with the customers, when I was actually working in as a window in the post office in San Juan. I used to work the window there also. And now I used to work in the back, and then I would do the relief on the window, and I worked windows on Saturdays. And I got to interact with the people, and I think that helped me a lot as far as this business is. Oh, yeah. But Stan Lee was doing a signing in Dallas, and he came actually a day early because he's going to leave a day early. He's going to leave because one of his friends had passed away, and so he was outside the convention hall, and one of our guys next to us went outside to have a smoke break, and he ran smack into Stan Lee out there, and Stan Lee said, "You got something for me to sign?" The guy says, "No, but I can get it." So he ran inside and got a comic for him to sign, but it was just he did it on his own without charging him or anything, because nobody does anything for free anymore in these conventions. It's $50 to $100 to $200-300 for a signature.
Yeah. Who's charging? I guess $300 for signatures there at the conventions. Do you know?
Some of those I can't remember. I think one guy that was playing was it Hawkeye.
Oh, so some of the Marvel guys show up there. I guess for $300 a pop for a signature, I think I would show up too, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's true. It's true. I think they were mentioning how some of these guys coming out, like in the Star Wars movies, how like they basically have their retirement right there. All they got to do is show up at a convention, even if it's $50 a pop.
I think the picture I took with Stan Lee was, I believe, $75, and I was the last person in line. So,
and he probably thought, this guy's cosplaying right here.
Yeah.
This is my everyday look.
What's your favorite movie, Helgi?
Oh, my favorite movie? Probably Gonzo Neverone.
I don't even know what that is.
I don't know what that is either.
What is Gonzo Neverone?
It's just a World War II movie.
Like, is it Japanese? Is it?
Oh, it's German. American German.
I really thought he was going to say The Postman by Kevin Costner.
No, I didn't.
I thought Helgi was more of a showgirls.
He likes Yellowstone.
If you can give us some business advice, Helgi, because as a small child, going into your shop and continuing going into your shop, I've noticed one thing, that be it a child, an adult, they sometimes tend to haggle you on some of those prices.
Oh, yeah.
So what is the Helgi rules for negotiating?
This is actually very relevant to our business.
No, but I think on most of my products, I pretty much remember or close in the ballpark what I paid for that item. So, and how long I've had it. So that depends. It depends on what you paid for and how long you had it. If you had something for a long time and hasn't moved, of course you can drop your price. If you had something that just came in, then stick pretty much to your guns.
Well, you also kind of do the barter system too, right?
Yeah, and we learned also in our business, we've decided if you trade something, then we'll give you a little more credit. In other words, if I would buy a $100 item, I would give you $60 cash. But if you trade, I'll give you $80 in credit in merchandise in the store. So it's like a win-win situation. You get more for the product. I actually and pay less for it.
And do you enjoy the haggle? Is that something you enjoy or not really?
No, I've never been a good. I always feel like I'm losing when I haggle.
What about your granddaughter? Is she better at it?
Well, she's young at it.
Learning.
She's learning.
I try to keep in mind the profit margin like you taught me, and I'm like, okay, but sometimes you do. And you
got to realize in business that for every $1 you sell, maybe 5 to 10 cents is profit at the end.
Yeah, you're not always hitting home runs.
No, and then that's basically when you take out all the cost and price, the cost of the merchandise, the expense of running a business, 5 to 10 cents on the dollar it's going to be your profit margin at the end of the year.
Do you want to say anything? I mean, I know your grandpa was a subject, but I mean, you're the next generation, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like sometimes you just learn. If you need to start a business, he's one of the top people to look to. Sacrifice for customers, you know. What else, Grandpa? If you had to give a business 101, what would you tell people?
Well, you should have good credit.
Well, that's a life lesson.
Well, believe it or not, we didn't touch too much on it, but when the comic book market crashed in like 95, 94, 95, when everything went south, I had my biggest orders coming in because everything was lagging behind, and I had 35 credit cards.
Oh, wow. Oh well, let's talk about that. I was actually wondering, like, how did you survive something like that? 35 credit cards, were they maxed out? I mean, what was going on with them?
Well, I had some at a zero balance, and I would I would transfer from one to the other, and I put a lot of them on my zero balance credit card. So I never really. I did ask Marvel once Diamond wants to. Can you? So I'm on a week's term. I have 7 days to make a payment, and I says, "Can you extend it to 14 days so I can cover me?" They said no. so and when I first started my businesses, I went to the bank and they just laughed at me. They said, "Comic books, that's not a real store, and we won't cover that. We won't owe you money for it."
And now look at your store.
Yeah, and I started my business with a credit card. And I've always had credit cards in my business, and I'd much rather do comics with running a business with credit cards than I would a bank.
Yeah, but that takes, I'm sure, a lot of discipline, though. Like you said, transferring money, being on top of your game.
I'm a numbers person, so I was pretty good at that. I tried to pay as little as I could in interest and overage and all that, and so it just came natural to me. But you have to learn. You have to learn it, though, and you have to discipline yourself. And
was that like the hardest time during your business? Was that period?
Yeah, I think the crash of that was the hardest.
That was 95.
Yeah, and it's called the comic book crash of 95, 96, I believe, if you look it up on the internet.
Yeah.
And what's the most expensive item you ever sold there?
I was thinking that before I got it. It was a Hulk 1 coverless.
A coverless Hulk? What do you mean a coverless Hulk 1?
The cover was missing.
And that was the most expensive item you ever sold?
$2,000.
Oh, wow.
And then I found the cover on the internet was going for $1,500. And with the cover, that book would have been for $7,500.
Oh, wow.
Well, thank goodness he didn't have that item when we walked into your shop.
Yeah. I mean, I've sold a lot of other stuff in the thousands of dollars, but, 100, I mean, 500, 800. But majority of our products are under $10.
And so, I mean, just for the people listening, there's products of all price ranges there, right?
Oh, yeah. We sell dollar comics. We sell all the way up to $1,000, $1,500.
Then you also have those people who will just drop $500 on just comic books.
Yeah.
Well, your shop is a staple within our community, and me and Chris, we always drop money there. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us your story, and thank your granddaughter very much for arranging this.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me, and I've enjoyed it, and it's refreshing to have your brain picked a little bit after 30 years doing this.
Oh, you're a legend. You're a legend.
But